Okay, welcome back after lunch. I can't see you at all. Okay, you're very welcome back. My name is Dr. Jo Day. I am a lecturer in Greek archaeology in the UCD School of Classics. I'm very pleased to have been invited to chair this session, which is on senses of the past, because this is one of my own areas of research. I'm sure you've all sort of noticed over the last 10 or 15 years that there's been an increasing amount of attention paid to multisensory human experience in the past and the present. And this is something as archaeologists that we really want to get our teeth into and try and think about how we can embrace this, what methodologies can we use, how can we think beyond just visual analysis, how can we find out about taste or touch or smell or any of these other ways of perceiving and experiencing. Our session this afternoon has got 2 papers in it, and they are both dealing with moving beyond visual ways of thinking about the past. So we're going to be learning about sound and about taste and flavor and things. Our first speaker that I'm very pleased to welcome is joining us magically online. It is Dr. Joshua Kumbani, who is currently a postdoctoral scholar on a European Research Council funded project in Barcelona called Art Soundscapes, which is looking at how sound contributes to creating sort of sacred space around rock art sites and sacred landscapes and things. He's also a research associate in the University of Johannesburg in the Paleo Research Institute, and his PhD was awarded in 2020 by the University of Witwatersrand, also in Johannesburg. So his focus is very much on the archaeology of Southern Africa. He does projects in Zimbabwe and in South Africa. His specialist area is the archaeology of sound and of music, and he's published quite widely on aerophones and idiophones, which are different types of sound making and music making materials. He's done a lot of work with different rock art sites. He's started branching into dance and sort of movement and rhythmic sound and things. So we're really pleased that he's here today to update us on the work that he's doing. His talk today is entitled A Snapshot of the Music Archaeology of Southern Africa. And magic, I'll turn it over to the IT people to make him appear for us. So thank you very much, Josh.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Joe, for the nice introduction. Am I audible? Can you all hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. He can't hear us.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua. Before I start the presentation, I just want to thank the organizers of the National Monument Service 7th Annual Conference for inviting me to come and present my work. And my sincere apologies for not making it to Dublin, but I'm glad that I've managed to join online. So today I'm going to present to you on a topic, a snapshot of music archaeology of Southern Africa. So as I was studying archaeology in Zimbabwe, I always had this question which lingered in my mind: was the past silent? So I used to ask my lecturers if there were ways in which we could reconstruct our music and sound production in the past. But however, their responses to me, they were not satisfactory. So I continued and I was very inquisitive to find out about music and sound production in the past. So this is how I fell in love with music archaeological research. I would want to believe that as human beings, we interact with music in our daily basis in one way or the other. And I'm glad that in Ireland, you've got the Trinity Harp as one of your national symbols, which emphasizes the music heritage. So I'm going to define music, and I normally prefer to use this definition by Atema, which says music is in the ear of the beholder. Because sometimes you may find out that what I may call music may not be music to the next person. And dance, it is a non-verbal cue and intentional body movement, which can be culturally constructed or not. And it is different from other motor activities like walking, for example. You also realize that music and dance, they are inseparable. In most cases, they work hand in glove. Music archaeology is defined as the reconstruction of how prehistoric communities interacted with sound and music by normally analyzing the physical archaeological remains as well as the analysis of archaeological iconographic material, for example, the rock paintings or murals. And it also investigates the effects of sound among the prehistoric communities, or what is called archaeoacoustic studies. And archaeoacoustic studies are mainly conducted in relation to rock art. So the idea is that were the people who were making rock art, were they influenced by the properties of sound? Some researchers, they prefer using the term sound archaeology instead of using music archaeology, because they argue that it is difficult for us to actually reconstruct the musical sounds of the past. So they prefer using a neutral term, sound. Music archaeology relies on a number of sources. And since music is an intangible aspect, you will find out that the sources of reconstructing music in the past, they are very delicate. So music archaeology, it also relies on three important sources, which include physical archaeological artifacts, remains, as well as iconography, which can include rock paintings or rock art. And we also rely on written sources. For example, you realize that travelers, hunters, historians, and anthropologists, they've recorded some practices of African populations that they came into contact with during their various expeditions in Africa. So these sources are very instrumental when we try to understand the music and sound production of people in the past. We use them for analogical inferences. The evidence that we have from Southern Africa of music and sound producing implements, it comes from the later Stone Age, the Iron Age, as well as the historical period. The instruments include spinning discs, a bullroarer, whistles, thumb piano keys, ombira keys, musical bells or gongs, a trumpet, and bone tubes that could have been used as flutes. And these artifacts, they fall into two categories, which are aerophones and idiophones. However, you will realize that there is a challenge in music archaeological research, because most of the musical instruments that are mainly manufactured using organic materials or plant-based materials, which easily decompose in the archaeological record before archaeologists come to dig. So this is one of the challenges when we are researching music of the past. Allow me to take you to Southern Africa. This slide is showing the map of Southern Africa, And some of the sites that we have that have yielded music or sound related artifacts. So as you can see, we've got evidence from Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and then South Africa. The red dots, they are indicating Iron Age sites, and the black dots, they are indicating the later Stone Age sites. And one green dot that we have, that's the site of Odepost 1 in South Africa, which was used by the Dutch around the 16th and 17th centuries. And as you can see, you realize that there are gaps in between, for example, in Botswana, Namibia, Lesotho, and Eswatini. So what does that mean? I'm not actually sure, but I think that those gaps, they indicate that there is not much that has been done in those countries as far as music archaeology research is concerned. Because normally the evidence that we find when we are doing our music archaeological research, we find these artifacts stored in museums and other storage places, and they would have accumulated dust because this subject has not been on a research agenda for a long time. So I believe that if someone puts time and effort, they might actually find some music-related artifacts in these countries, specifically in museums and other storage facilities. I'll first talk about bullroarers. A bullroarer is often described as a flat oblong piece made of bone, wood, or stone, and it has got one perforation where it is strung. Their shapes, they can vary from oval, rectangular, and sometimes they have got serrated edges. This implement, it can be spun above the head, adjacent, or perpendicular to your body. In archaeological research, it has been established that sometimes a form, it misleads the interpretation of artifacts, because sometimes the form of an artifact doesn't necessarily tell you what it was used for. And I'm going to interpret this point further in the next slides. So what you are seeing on this slide are the bone implements that are labeled. They are archaeological materials which have been recovered from Marquis River site on the southern Cape Coast of South Africa. They were earlier interpreted as pendants, and if you look at their shape, it is logical to say that they could have been used as pendants worn around someone's neck as necklaces. So the other four pieces, they are replicas, and I'm going to expand more in the next slides about the replicas. So what we did, we conducted an experiment where we replicated the four archaeological implements, and then the replicas, they were mechanically spun for 15 hours as bullroarers, because we wanted to find out what kind of useful patterning does the spinning action produce around the perforations. So the results indicated that the spinning action of the bullroarers, the useful patterning was found or observed on the lateral sides of the perforation. So either on the left or on the right side of the perforation, and very minimal use at the top and at the bottom of the perforation. So what I did, I then analyzed the four archaeological implements to try and see and observe the useway patterning. So I realized that three of the pieces, they had useway, which was concentrated at the top of the perforation, and only one implement had useway that was concentrated on the lateral sides, on the left side and on the right side, which matched the results which I found on the replicas. And this meant that this piece, it was spun as a bullroarer. So that's the MR40 that you are seeing on this slide. But however, it is interesting because the recordings of the bullroarers, it produces a very powerful buzzing or whirring sound. And then it goes back to the question, what is music? Is every sound musical? So it is a debatable topic. But however, we understand that a bullroarer has been classified as one of the aerophones that were used as musical implements in the past. So as I was doing a background reading, I came across some bullroarers which were recovered from the Upper Paleolithic of Europe in France, for example. And I realized that the shape of the Marquis River implements were similar to those some known bullroarers that were found in the Upper Paleolithic of Europe. So this work kind of informed my research when I was doing my research on music and sound producing implements from Southern Africa. And if you look even the size, it's almost close to some of the non-bullroarers that were recovered somewhere around the world. So a bullroarer is a common implement which was used across the world. And at some point, the British anthropologist Edward Barnett Taylor remarked that the use of the bullroarer in Africa as well as among the Australian Aborigines was supposed to be investigated further. So from the archaeological record, we also have some bone tubes which could have been used as flutes, and they've been recovered from later Stone Age, Iron Age, as well as historical context. And some of the sites where these implements have been found include the Marquis River, Nelson Bay, Jekelders, Boomplaas, Bondebeek Shelter, Odepost 1, all in South Africa, and then Chondwe site in Zambia. Their main characteristics is that they all lack finger holes. So this is one example of a bone tube from Marquis River, and it is 18 centimeters long, and it is smoothened on both ends. You will realize that some of the pieces are only cut on one end, and it could have happened that they were cut during the process of making other bone tubes, and then they would use the remaining part as a whistle. For example, the figure on top, it's a phalange that was cut into two, and then it was now possibly used as a whistle. And also some of the bone tubes have got very neat decorations, which include cross hatching as well as a chevron pattern. We also have clay whistles, which have been recovered from early Iron Age context from the site of K2. And this piece that you are seeing, the other half is missing. And it is interesting to note that it was recovered from a burial context. And it also have some comb stamping decoration on it around its midsection. The other similar piece was recovered from the site of Mapungubwe, which is also close to K2. And it also has some oblique lines of incisions and fine diamond mesh-like decoration on the lower bottom part of the implement. But however, the decorations are not clear. So from the ethnographic record, we do not have much information about use of such clay whistles, but from my personal interactions with the curator at the University of Pretoria Museum, she told me that similar implements are used in Lesotho by herders. So they use them as a signaling implements when they are herding to control cattle and sheep and goat. We also have thumb piano keys, or what is called mbira keys, from the later Iron Age context in Zimbabwe as well as in Zambia. So these implements or these artifacts have been recovered from Great Zimbabwe, Goose Bay, Danangombe sites in Zimbabwe, and then in Zambia from Ingombe Ilede. And that picture shows a thumb piano key which was recovered from Great Zimbabwe site. The mbira has got a long history in Africa. According to Kubik and Cook, they suggest that the earlier version of mbira or lamellophone, it was made using raffia palm tree in West Africa, in Gabon, Southern Cameroon, and possibly Eastern Nigeria before the migration of the Bantu. So it is argued that the Iron Age populations, they migrated from further north, coming down to the Southern African part. And ethnographically, you will find out that the Shona people in Zimbabwe and the Venda people in South Africa, they use the mbira instrument during ancestral veneration ceremonies, which indicate that the instrument has got some socio-cultural and religious significance besides it being used for entertainment purposes. There are also musical bells or gongs which have been recovered from the archaeological record, and these have been recovered from Tulamela in South Africa, Great Zimbabwe, Lodlo, Chomunungwa in Zimbabwe, as well as Ingombe in Zambia. It is interesting to note that Tulamela and Ingombe gongs were recovered from burial context. These musical bells, they occur in two types. It can be a single bell or it can be a double bell. And it is said that the musical bells were associated with royalty. And the sites of Great Zimbabwe, for example, and Tulamela, they have been interpreted as being as to have been associated with royalty, which kind of make sense because these were recovered at these sites that are said to have been kingdoms during the later Iron Age. So this is an example of a double bell. The iron bells or musical bells have been recovered from Southern Africa, but their source of origin is believed to be Central African region going into West Africa. So perhaps they might have reached Southern Africa through trade and exchange. It is also interesting to note that the musical bells are still in use, for example, in West Africa. And in South Africa, the late Yuma Sekela, who was a well-known jazz musician, he used to play a single musical bell during his musical processions. There's also an ivory trumpet which was recovered at a trading site on the coastal Mozambique. And it was recovered after its protruding one end was seen close to wall foundations, and it was associated with Chinese ceramics and locally made clay pottery. Its original length was 48.3 centimeters, but now it is broken and it is housed at the University of Pretoria Museum in South Africa. I was told that it accidentally broke when it was being transferred from where it was once kept before it was transferred to University of Pretoria Museums. And now they are trying to resuscitate it, but it is in bad state. And there is also no accurate date for the aerophone, but it is believed to have been used around the 16th century going forward. The trumpets are not a common occurrence in the archaeological record of Southern Africa, and ivory trumpets are also foreign in Southern African region, but however, they are known from West Africa, for example, in Ghana. And it is interesting to note that in Southern Africa, there were and there are still a lot of heads of elephants, but we haven't heard of the manufacturing of ivory trumpets. For example, in Ghana, the Ntahera, the Asande have got what they call the Ntahera, which is an ensemble of 7 trumpets, and it belongs to the Royal Asande. And they also believe that these trumpets, they've got a spiritual significance. So in Southern Africa, the trumpets are mainly made of antelope horns, but we haven't found any so far from the archaeological record, but we know them from the ethnographic context. So I'm now switching to rock art and evidence of music expressions that we find in the rock art, which could be either dancing scenes or depiction of musical instruments. Generally, the interpretation of rock art in Southern Africa, it is associated with the trance dance or the medicine dance and ritual performances. So in the rock art, for example, as you can see from this image, it shows people who are engaging in dancing, and they are also wearing leg rattles, which are part of musical instruments. So this happens a lot in Southern Africa, where we find people who are dancing, and sometimes they are having musical instruments. This is one example of a site with a panel of bullroarer players from Doring Riverside, which is located in the Cedarburg in the Western Cape of South Africa. So on this panel, we've got about 8 people who are swinging bullroarers. And as you can see, those zoomed in images, you can actually see that there is an oblong piece which is connected with a string, and the arm is raised upwards, which signify or indicate an action of bullroarer spinning. Someone spinning their bullroarer either above the head or perpendicular to their body. And it is interesting to note that we have got a bullroarer from the archaeological excavation dated to the later Stone Age, and they also occur in the rock art, which is also dated around the same time period. In Zimbabwe, at Bushman Point site, we've got evidence of a drum depiction, which is labeled A. So if you look at it, you will see the conical shape, which resembles some of the drums that we have in Africa, with a broad top and then a tapering bottom. And when you look at the image, you will see individuals labeled B and C. Those are flutists that seem to be playing pipes, and they are facing each other, which indicates that there might have been a music procession which was going on. I just want to point something interesting about this panel. This panel has been published a couple of times by other researchers, but interestingly, they never mentioned the occurrence of the drum as well as the flutist. And what does that mean? It just indicates that they were more interested in other aspects. For example, the presence of the eland as well as elephants, which occur on the same panel because they are said to be associated with potency, which the Seni people are believed to have given them power. We also have evidence of musical bowls in Southern Africa, from Lesotho, South Africa, and Namibia. So this is an example from White Valley in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. And as you can see, that person who is sitting is tapping the musical bow string with a stick, and it is resonated with that white circle, which is a gourd. So the gourd, its purpose is to resonate the sound or to amplify the sound. And then on to your right, it is an example from Namibia, from the Daureb region, where we see the players, they are also tapping the bowstring using a stick. So this is some of the evidence that we have in the rock art. It is also interesting to note that we do not have evidence of drums and musical bowls from archaeological excavations, but we find them in the rock paintings, which shows how important is rock art as a source of music archaeology, because those implements which do not survive for too long, their evidence, it only comes from the paintings, which shows that at some point they were being used in the past. So this shows how complementary rock art is as a source of music archaeology. We also have evidence of dancing as well as flute playing and use of hand rattles or shakers from the site of Atakwa's in the southern Karoo of South Africa. And then in Zimbabwe, we've got a flute player from Hay Grange site in the Matopos World Heritage Landscape. So these are some of the instruments that we find in the rock art in Southern Africa, which indicate music or sound production as well as dancing. So to sum up, the physical evidence which points to sound and music production it is only available in artifacts that can be categorized as aerophones and idiophones. And cordophones and membranophones only occur in rock paintings. For example, a musical bowl, which is a cordophone, and a drum, which is a membranophone, they only occur in the rock art, as I earlier mentioned. And you also realize that musical instruments have got various functions, including entertainment, rituals, and signaling purposes. Moreover, there is a close association or a close relationship between musical instruments and burials from later Stone Age and later Iron Age, which might hint on the close relationship of musical instruments or music in general with rituals. Maybe there were some rituals which were carried out when people were burying their dead. I'm not quite sure about that. Sometimes musical instruments, they are difficult to identify. For example, as I earlier interpreted that the bone tubes were earlier interpreted as beads and pendants. But however, when you look at them, it is most probable that they could have been used as bone flutes to produce musical sound. Rock art, it also has evidence of musical instruments and dancing scenes, which hints on aspects of music and sound production in the past. Musical instruments depictions in the rock art are sometimes missed or not identified in panel interpretations. For example, what I mentioned earlier about the Bushman site, where the drum and the flutist have been missed in earlier publications. Rock art or iconography is a very important source of music archaeology. We also have a challenge, which is preservation, because most of the musical instruments, like I mentioned earlier, they are made of organic materials and they easily decompose, and they cannot be recovered in the archaeological record. And also I have to mention that music archaeology in Southern Africa is still slowly gathering its momentum as compared to other parts of the world. For example, here in Europe, we've got specialized groups or music research groups. And there's one which specializes solely on music archaeological research. I think this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. And I just want to thank the organizers and the sponsors of this conference once again for inviting me to come and speak to you. I thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Josh. That was really interesting, and I'm sure we'll have lots of questions and discussion about it after our next paper.